Welcome to What's the Point? I'm Bill Ellis. Each week I talk with people about the moments that shape them, the choices that change them, and what those stories might spark in you. So with that said, let's get into today's conversation. Hi, welcome to What's the Point? This is where we take time to explore what shapes us, what changes us, and what gives our lives meaning over time. I'm your host, Bill Ellis, and today my guest is Annie Dike. Annie is a writer whose work spans fiction and nonfiction, and whose life has taken her through very different worlds: a complex early life, a career in law, years spent living and working at sea, and a continuing commitment to writing as a way of making sense of experience. Today we'll explore what Annie's adventures and misadventures have taught her and what we might take from them for ourselves. So before we start, Annie, are you on land or at sea?
Today I'm on land.
Okay.
I'm not rocking currently.
For the benefit of those not watching on YouTube, for the benefit of those listening. So welcome. I'm looking
Thank
forward to
you.
our conversation. And let's start with a little bit of what started to make Annie Dike Annie Dike. Let's talk about some of that formative experience. You were born and raised in Clovis, New Mexico, which is also the name
That's
of your
correct.
current book, which we'll definitely get to in a bit. What stands out most to you from your time living in Clovis?
Dust. No. Yeah. So Clovis, New Mexico has a special place in my heart for sure. One of the things that when I was young and, when you grow up in it, you don't appreciate it. You want to get away from it. It's bleak. It's, lacking of all sorts of excitement, resources, fun things. So you kind of want to just run away from it. But I found later in life, I appreciated it more and wanted to come back to it. And the reason were a lot of the people. Clovis is not, I would say it's not a city that has a lot of exciting things happening, but the people there that grounded me, my mother, my father, my brother, we were a very tight little family. My parents were divorced, but my brother and I were super, super close. And I think just growing up in that tight shell with a sibling like that, and that'll form the basis for the Clovis book. And we were quite poor, we just didn't have a lot. And I missed a lot from that childhood, the creativity of finding things to do, playing with things that weren't toys, sticks and rubber bands and cardboard boxes. And these are formative things for me. I think a childhood with creativity like that and finding yourself and building yourself is important. And I think that's what I had in Clovis that I'm lucky that I had. I didn't have a lot of money and things, but I had a lot of support in the way of find your own entertainment and find your own strength and things like that.
There's a lot to that. What's interesting is I'm at the point now that I'm a grandfather, and I've got twin 14-year-olds and a young little dude who's 15 months. And just to see what they'll go to, you'll give them, I don't know, a toy, a game, or something, and they'll play with the box, or they'll play with the
Exactly.
empty tube of wrapping paper. It's just the creativity of a young mind is amazing. So having that and having your brother to help drive that, what a gift. It truly is a gift. But I, you you had a lot to do early on about adapting and coping or finding your footing, partly because you said your parents were divorced. They lived apart. They lived on opposite sides of the country, yes?
Yeah, very far apart. Yeah. So one of the cool things about growing up that thankfully I will say, and we talked about this a little bit before, Bill, like travel and seeing different parts of the world. And I don't always mean just internationally, like a different state, a different city, leave the space you're in. One thing that's very lucky for me when I was a kid, not money or resources, but this opportunity. So my dad was in Alabama. He's over in the middle of the Alabama state, and my mom's in New Mexico. That's whatever, 10 states
Mhm.
apart, right? And we would go, my dad was a long haul cattle driver, and he would get cattle trucks and take them out to New Mexico to pick up me and my brother to go to Alabama to visit him for the whole summer. And we would go in the sleeper cab of his big truck for like 2 days on the road overnight. And then I'm in Alabama, this lush, rich, like greenery, trees, horses, a farm, it's totally different than New Mexico. And just the diversity of that experience, the different people I met. I think because my family is divorced, I actually kind of had like four families,
You're
I had like this grandma, that grandma, this stepdad, step parents, in-laws, it's not always a bad thing. It can really grow this universe of people that raise you. So I was very pleased with that part in hindsight that I got to
Really?
travel cross country many, many times in my youth, not in this privileged way, but in a very unique and very cool way that was educational.
So from the dusty open land of New Mexico to the lush green of Alabama, your father had a ranch. It was now help me. Was he a competitive bull rider?
I was gonna say we could spend a whole hour on my
Huh.
dad. He was a professional bull
Okay.
rider and then was number 12 in the nation, like back in his day. He was very, very good. I have some really cool pictures I can send you that you can pop up here because I can't believe that's my dad. When I see the pictures, I'm like, get off! You still have to birth me somehow, you know? But you see him doing his 8 seconds. It's very cool. He was a professional bull rider. And the funny thing, this is the Alabama to New Mexico connection. Back in that day, Bill, and maybe they still do today, they had a bull riding scholarship that took my dad from Alabama to New Mexico.
Wow.
That's why he went to New Mexico on a bull riding scholarship to go to Eastern New Mexico University. And that's how he met my mom. And then the rodeo life is very hard on your body, as you can imagine. My dad has a back that's been fused twice now and a foot that doesn't pick up now, but he's still alive, which is great. But bull riding turned to roping and rodeoing and long haul cattle drive. That's sort of,
Mhm.
and that's a common evolution for a cowboy, if you want to know.
Yeah, the impact on the body of a bull rider and a cowboy in general is something I can only want to imagine and not really want to
It's tough.
experience,
It's
to be
tough.
honest.
Yeah.
So what kind of instincts from that time do you still recognize about yourself? What kind of things did you learn that are still meaningful?
Oh man, that's the reason, and we'll get to it later. One of the big reasons I wrote the Clovis book was those
Mhm.
years with my dad, with my brother. They're formative. And the biggest lesson I think from my dad, and this shines in the book, is resilience. Things are going to give you a challenge. And let's just pick an easy challenge, like on the farm, you need to fix a fence or something. Dad will come up with something creative, like, hey, let's use this wire and these pliers and that hay bale over here. We'll get this fixed. It's no problem. So it's kind of overcoming adversity with creative solutions was definitely my dad my entire life. And humor, like we went through a lot of really, I'm trying not to say an expletive, hard things as a kid, very, very crappy things. And dad always brought the sunshine and the life and the jokes and the songs, and you'll see that in the book. And he taught me that, like, you can find your happiness
Mm.
in here, even when people are screaming around you and there's fighting going on. That's a great lesson. Resilience and humor and creativity. That's my dad. And then my mom is a whole nother side, which is a lot of other lessons. But she's strength and discipline and get your act together, which are very important too. But that's definitely the lessons that stick from that childhood.
What a nice combination.
It really
I'm not sure
was.
what
And
it
I,
was
and I
like
feel
when
like I
you were
praise
going
that.
through it, but in hindsight and hearing about it, what a wonderful blend. S-
I'm glad to hear you say that because a lot of people see a divorced family as a bad thing. And I don't think it has to be.
You're exactly right. I agree with you. It's it's something that doesn't have to be. I'm divorced. My current wife is divorced, and it's just so common these days. And
It is.
to make the best of it, the old line, which I don't know where it came from, it takes a village. It actually works well. What you said of having so many
It really does.
grandmothers, so many uncles, so much family, as long as everyone's on the same page and just trying to live a good life and help the child grow. And
Well, that's not always
sometimes
the
that gets a
case.
little wonky, but
It
still,
does.
it doesn't have to be that.
Exactly.
So when you were a young adult, what kind of life did you imagine you were building?
When I was a teenager,
Whatever. You take it from where you want to go.
man, I mean, as a teen, I was trying to get out of Clovis, trying to, for me, thankfully, my mom was good at this and my brother. Education. Like we all knew going to school, getting good grades was going to be the ticket out. That's what we were all focused on. But even my mom, she pushed very hard to get good grades and make sure you've done all the right things. And in hindsight, when I look back on that, she was helping us leave her, and go off and spread our wings. And that had to have been hard. But she pushed that. My brother pushed that. And so in my teen years, I was actually exhausted. I was like cheerleader and SGA president and choir and pop choir and all these things. I was very, very busy and I just wanted to go. What I didn't realize is what was going to face me out there, like the cold smack of water that is reality when you're young and 18 and just branching out. But as a teen, I thought it was going to be the miracle frontier. It was going to be perfect. All my parents, they thought they knew everything and they made all the mistakes and I was smart and going to do it right. And so I was kind of righteous as a teenager. You think you know it all. And I was just preparing to get out of there, working my tail off to get my resume and not so I could go.
So what that tells me is it wasn't at all an uncommon experience at that age, because I think most people in the 18, 19, 20 year range, we all thought we had it all and we learned. But But where you ended up going was to law. Tell me about your pursuit of law.
So all of that to say, thankfully, in a young age, I was fairly proficient in writing and reading. Math, I'm not great at all. But writing and reading, I was strong. And my brother was too. And so I thought law for, I always thought that going on mainly, this sounds terrible, but just to make a lot of
Really?
money. Like I just, people are like, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer. And this actually starts a very long, and I call it my supposed to track, Bill, all the things I was supposed to do. So I thought I'm supposed to go to college. I'm supposed to get a big degree, like one of the letter degrees, and graduate school and get a salary. I was supposed to get a salary. I was supposed to make over six figures. That all these things were going to make me happy is what I thought. So I picked the law, I'll be honest, as kind of a parachute. I thought I might be good at it and it's going to make good money. I'll be comfortable, not like my family was growing up. I won't struggle to pay bills. I won't do those things. I'm going to be comfortable and happy. That's what I thought. I would say now I love the law and there's parts of it that I love to practice and do. They're very different than when I started. What I started in, I ended up not loving. It was very difficult and hard, and I can talk about that. But I went to the law as an out, basically, like a parachute.
So when you went through the law, you got your degree. What happened then? Where did you start practicing? Were you still in Clovis?
No, goodness no. So I left, 18, I left New Mexico. I didn't know that you didn't know that. So I left just the whole thing and all my friends and everything. It was a big cutoff for me, which is a big transition, and that's in the book too. But I went out to Alabama because my dad's family was there and they had more resources. Honestly, they could offer a little bit of money because I couldn't afford to live on my own quite yet. And I was able to get scholarships and things. So I started undergrad in 2000 in Alabama, just in a dorm room by myself. I just moved in and there it was. And I started college and went 7 years all the way through at Alabama to law school, which is good. And I'm glad I did it. And I worked very hard, at my grades and studying. And I was working like 2 jobs. But I do wish now that I'm older, and I can see, I wish I'd, done more things with my life at that age, like learned myself, travel, done something else. And I went straight through like a pipeline, but I just thought that was, I kept the pedal on myself, and I do that all the time. I'm very hard on myself, but I pushed myself right through. And when I graduated, I was very lucky that I got a job with a firm in Mobile, Alabama, which is kind of South Alabama. And that's what kind of trickles me down to Pensacola, which is where I'm at now. You can see me like flipping down to the water.
Hoping down.
I'm sliding down to it. But I started with a firm. I was very lucky that they hired me. It was hard to get a job, and it's a prestigious, good firm, but it was on the defense side. So I was defending big corporations, insurance companies primarily, and found very quickly I did not like that. And that is soul scraping work. It's not fulfilling. But you don't know these things. You're young when you start and you're just trying really hard to please everybody and do what you're told. And that's what I was doing on the supposed to track. I became very successful. I also became very unhealthy and unhappy.
You got married during that time?
I did. I got married. I met my husband in undergrad. I'm trying to remember. Maybe my second year, and he was fun. He was great. He was a good builder with his hands. He was energetic. He loved me and was a very good person at heart, which thankfully I didn't marry somebody who was, sinister or had a darker streak, because we ended up getting divorced about 10 years after I met him, 5 years into the marriage. And mainly he just let me down. I hate to say this, Phil, but he just couldn't accomplish things in his life. He couldn't graduate from college. He couldn't break away from his parents. He was very dependent on them. And those things just started to really grate on me. You can imagine the person that I am and what I came from. I was probably very hard on him, but I expected a lot more out of him. But that, it just fell apart that way. Thankfully, before we had kids, before we had really significant ties, I was the breadwinner, so everything was in my name. So it was kind of easy in that regard. But the thing was, I was ashamed of it, and I was scared it was going to ruin my professional career. So I kept it very, very quiet. Surprisingly, I got divorced like in a whisper. Nobody heard about it.
Well, we'll talk about it in a second, because I think there's a couple of important points there. Clearly, you weren't comfortable at work and you weren't comfortable in your marriage. So you were starting to get a real true sense that life wasn't aligning with what you had expected, hoped, wanted, or needed. What started with that? How long did you live with that discomfort before you acted on it? And tell us about what actions those were.
And the harder part was the career, actually, which surprised even me. But so 2000, I started working as a lawyer, or I went to undergrad, so that was 2000. I started as a lawyer in '07. So I worked from '07 to 13 as a trial lawyer and actually became a trial lawyer at the firm. I was doing medical malpractice defense, where you defend a hospital or nurses when they've committed malpractice allegedly, and also insurance companies when they have property damage claims. I defend the insurance company. So I did that for 6 years at that firm. And I will say about 2 to 3 years into the practice, I was learning that the things we were doing, without disclosing too much, just weren't quite on the up and up. The way insurance companies operate, I can just say it's just not, doesn't make me feel good in my core. So that was starting to weigh on me. That was tough. And that started to make me angry. I'm sure that I would go home and I worked a job that didn't make me feel good about myself. I'm sure I was short with my husband, who had not done anything that day, and I was very angry at him. So this cycle was probably 3 or so years, because I didn't divorce my husband until 2011. It took me a long time to get to that decision because I did it very much alone. I decided it alone and I did it alone. I was afraid, I'll be honest, Bill, I thought they would fire me at the firm. I didn't know that this is an okay thing, that people get divorced. I was so afraid that I was an imposter. How could they believe this little girl from Clovis, New Mexico is an actual lawyer? I thought, don't do anything to disrupt the apple cart, and so once I did that, though, once I did get divorced, and the firm, they found out, because I had to let them know for tax purposes mainly. I didn't change my name for that reason. And so I told them, they were more accepting of it. And I realized, holy crap, I just changed something in my life that was, bad for me. And now I see this whole career thing is not treating me well either. And I'm going to have to change that. That was a lot harder, Bill. That was a very scary thing to do. And I could tell you how I started it. I told them I was going to leave, and I gave them a year, and they didn't believe me. The problem was, and I talked to Philip a lot about it, and like you and I discussed earlier, Philip is my new partner. I could tell you how I met him right in the middle of the divorce. And so I was just coming off the divorce, and right in the middle of this whole career transition, I met Philip. And he's the one that encouraged me. He's my current partner now. He's a lawyer. Was a Marine. He's just an amazing man, which I could talk about in the whole hour, so you'll have to rein me in. But he encouraged me. He said, if you're not happy at your career, you have to leave. You've got to go. And it was shocking just to hear that. So much time and money I'd put into becoming a lawyer, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and years. But he encouraged me. And so I did. I told them I was leaving. I gave them a year. And Bill, they didn't believe me. And they kept putting work on me. But I finally had to work remotely. When it was time to leave, I said, I'm actually going. And so they said, holy crap, we've got to pay you remotely. And that started my whole transition into this lifestyle that I'm in now.
So that must have been a combination of very scary and yet very freeing all at the same time. You talk about fear or the worry of all the invested time and money and experience, and to walk away from it. That's a hard thing to do, but a lot of us have to kind of look at that and take that under consideration. How did you handle that when you went from a career that certainly you weren't very happy, but it brought you prestige and status and probably some pretty decent money? How was it adjusting from that into the new role, whatever that was turning out to be?
I think part of the thing, and this is me just thinking about it now, Bill, I think one of the things that made it easier for me at 18, leaving home and starting all on my own, on a different chapter, I think that told me, I can do it again. You can start over again. You're strong enough. You're capable enough. So I do think me being an isolated person in college and undergrad and all that probably gave me the strength to do this. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because community can help, but community can also hold you back. If they're discouraging you to do things that sound scary and brave. So me being an isolated person kind of makes that my ability to do that. But I was terrified. Part of the hard part, Bill, was finding a new identity. Who am I now? I am still a lawyer, but what a lot of people, when you meet people, they ask you, oh, what do you do? And that can be a loaded question for someone like me. Not that I'm ashamed, but I'm a lawyer now. I am a lawyer. Do I practice law? Not really. Do I do side gigs? Yeah. Do I write books? Yeah. Do they sell? Sometimes. It's like, what do I do? So the identity was very hard. Who am I going to be? That's what I struggled with initially, because I had a little money. The money didn't scare me as much, and I don't mean that just in a frivolous way, but I knew I had a law
Mhm.
degree. Like, the money just didn't really terrify me. It's finding who I was and what I was gonna be happy doing. That's what I was really scared with. And I started with some side gigs that Philip was very creative. He's like, "You're a lawyer, work for lawyers. Like, maybe they need marketing help, maybe they need litigation support." Turns out they do a lot of
Yeah.
it, and they pay well, and they want you to do it remotely, and it's a great gig. And so I just finally saw outside of the box because of him. He was able to see different outcomes and resolutions, and I did trust him a lot, for sure. That he saw it and he believed it with such confidence, and he was right. Now
Yeah.
we're 20 years later, but I wasn't. I was terrified at the moment. He was a big confidence booster for
Yeah,
me.
what a blessing to have made connection, to have that connection, quote unquote, just randomly, serendipitously appear in your life. I think there's more to it than that. But you talk about people wondering, what do you do? And that's so common in our society. What do you do? And that's how we
Yeah,
seem to define each other and put each other in a category, as opposed to who are you?
I know.
And
I
that
know.
makes it very hard for someone like you who had to shift from what they were doing to something new and having to explain, no, I'm not that anymore, or am I that anymore? So to have someone that you can trust, to have a trusted
Mhm.
advisor, whether it's a confidant, whether it's a coach, and in your case, someone that you built a relationship with, what a gift that is, because oftentimes we need someone else to point out the positives in our life. So those listening, if you're stuck
Mhm.
someplace, we don't have to stay stuck. And if you're doubting yourself, seek someone who believes in you
Mhm.
for your best interest, not for what they think is best for you. So that's a terrific thing. So when you started to move on, had that sense of doubt been with you your whole life, or is that something that just really kind of crashed in at that time when you were transitioning from your one legal career to a different legal marketing
So
career?
the next one, well, when you say the sense of doubt, I'm gonna think that you're probably talking about, like, I have huge imposter
Yeah.
syndrome. I have that time, and I think a lot of people do. Like, some days I always feel like I'm gonna wake up and they're gonna figure me out. Today's the day. I really don't know the law. But I've struggled with that forever, and I always work harder than everybody because I feel like I have so
Mhm.
much to compensate for. And just briefly on Philip, while you're on him, what Philip sees in me that I don't see, and I hope a lot of people find this, he sees the talents I don't. I see the failure, the mistake, but he's like, in doing that, and when you made the mistake, you were helping this person and this
Yeah.
person, you accomplished this. And I just don't see that. I don't see it at all. And he helps with that a lot. So he helps me see skills and talents that I have that I don't. Perfect example, and this will just highlight, I think your question was your doubt. So we started sailing. Philip, when I met him, he was a sailor at the time, but more like a weekend kind of fun sailor in Pensacola, Florida. And he had an uncle who had taught him to sail, and they sailed together for many years. And right when I met Philip, his uncle was passing away. He had about a month to live from colon cancer, which is horrible and a tragedy. And somehow Philip and I united in that moment. And Philip told me, "I'm going to get on a
Sure.
boat and sail around the world." And I was like, "That sounds amazing." And I've told you this, but some people don't believe me, but it's in all of my history of my failing blog. I agreed day one. I was like, that sounds amazing because you've heard where I was at with my divorce and my career. But Philip, what he sees in me is my talents and skills. I was worried I was going to be a good sailor. Like, I don't know how to sail. I don't know how to
Well,
do this. I'm going to get in the boat and mess everything up. But being a farm girl, if you recall, where I've got pliers in my hands and, mending fences and fixing things, I actually turned out to be a very good cruiser. I'm an okay sailor, but a cruiser, like someone who owns and maintains their boat, I'm phenomenal at. And Philip saw that. He saw the durability in me. He saw the tenacity, whereas I'd see the failures, the lack of sailing knowledge, the lack of pomp and blue blazer, how am I going to fit in at the yacht club? Like, that's what I was doubting when I was trying to be that person, and when I'm a lawyer, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid they're going to figure me out there. I feel it all the time, Bill. Honestly, I don't know. Some days when I wake up and pretend confident, I do it every day. Maybe it's a female too.
I believe that that's probably something that you're growing out of, that imposter
I
syndrome. Probably a bit. I'll leave that to you and Philip to discuss. What I do want to ask you though, we've spoken before, and today again, you talked about the difference between sailing and cruising. It's kind
Yeah.
of a
Yeah.
sailor term that those of us that are landlocked don't. Well, explain the difference, please.
Perfect. I'm glad you asked. And I hope there's sailors and cruisers listening. They may disagree, but there are cruisers are people who live on their boat and cruise around. So they're not just hopping on a Saturday and going for like a day sail, which means they know how to, fix the electrical system, the plumbing, the build, how the bilge pumps work. They can probably fix the whole engine if they need to. Diesel mechanics, these are the types of people that work well in that segment. So cruisers are very hardy people. You're not going to squash them. They're like cockroaches. They're going to walk around in the rain and get their groceries. They don't care. They're going to have, windblown hair and salt-borne faces and a plier in their back pocket. And they're going to be able to handle anything, and they're kind of like the apocalyptic bunch. That's cruisers. And they can be sailors too. It's like a Venn diagram where they overlap. But sailors, often people that are great at sailing, are people that go out and trim the lines and, pull something, and they know all this stuff about wind and physics and that I don't, not at all. And I still call them a rope sometimes, and it's a sheet. So there's all this language too that you got to know. So it's just a different cut of cloth. If you are very, very good at trimming sails and making a boat go fast, is different from can you maintain the boat and fix the engine and clean the bilge. Does that make sense?
100%. And thank you for explaining it. All that experience, what has it taught you about trust and responsibility and capability and adapting?
Cool. Well, two people on a boat together and we're out in the ocean or crossing the Gulf of Mexico or anything there's a lot of trust.
Mhm.
So we do night shifts, where I'm up for 2 hours and I'm manning the whole boat and it's going in the dark in the water and Philip's asleep. He's asleep. And a quick aside, it did take a long time for us to get there. He used to sleep in the cockpit with like one eye open. We'd joke around, but he finally
Mhm.
graduated to going downstairs and he goes to sleep. And there's so much trust there because I have to spot problems. I have to make an executive decision whether to wake him up or hail the other boat if we might be hitting another boat, things like that. That's a night shift example. But also plenty of other trust in everything we do. We crank the engine when we're backing up out of a slip, when we're eyes and ears for each other. And I think the biggest part of that, Bill, is trust is I think it comes from communication. And what happens on the boat is it's this big. And so you have to talk to each other. I've got to tell Philip the very embarrassing things. Like I just messed up on something
Mhm.
and I'm really embarrassed. And so I'm flustered right now and I'm going to be angry and just give me a minute, and I have to walk away from him. And I just have to say those blunt things that sound, basic and elementary, but I've just got to communicate what's going through my head so he understands. And he'll do it too. And he's like, I'm really pissed off. I can't look at you right now. And he'll go do whatever
Mhm.
he needs to do. And we come back and we talk about it, but you just have to communicate. You just have to say the things that may hurt, might, offend people's pride, but you just got to get them out there. And I think trust comes from communication.
Agree again with that 100%, or I'm agreeing a lot with everything you're saying.
Let's get in the
But
fight.
what you just said, again, there's so many great lessons from what you're saying about from your life. Being able to admit our shortcomings. Let's face it, we're human. If it's the highest rank we get in this world, then that means we're imperfect and will always be imperfect. So we're going to mess up. But being able to tell, in particular, a partner, whether it's a business partner, a life partner, a sailing mate, any type of partnership, that I screwed up, here's the potential impact,
Yep.
and then sorting through it. Because the key is to accept the fact that we're going to make mistakes, but say, what are we going to learn from that? So the
Right.
way I've heard it put is learn the lesson, leave the event. You know, I
Oh,
I screwed up.
that's a great
Yeah,
phrase.
let me learn the lesson from that, and then I pulled the rope instead of whatever. We'll forget that for right now, but I learned from it.
Right. I'm glad you said that just because I struggle with forgiving myself, Bill. And you probably have been able to hear that in this. So that's going to help me. Honestly, I get very angry with myself and it lingers too long.
I don't think you're alone in that.
Uh, so that will help me. Thank you.
I'm glad to help. It helped me when someone shared it with me. So you move from somewhat being a life with traditional markers of success, prestige, office, whatever, and into like a whole new area with different markers. How do you begin to define enough? What's enough for you?
And I think you're thinking like what fulfills me and makes me feel like I have enough of an identity. Is that sort of the question?
That's where you want to take it. It's up to
I
you.
love it. And you made me think of the identity. One thing that happened in the sailing that was kind of a great thing. I invented myself yet again. Maybe that's sort of my talent, but I became a sailing writer, and I can only see now patterns back, but I write. Obviously, I've written my entire life about all sorts of things. I just didn't know at the time that I had such a need for it in my life. But when I left the legal career, so I'm not writing as much legal briefs and things, I start writing again because I can't help it. And I start writing about sailing because I'm sailing.
Mhm.
That's what I'm doing. And so I become like a sailing book writer. And that happens, and I write Salt of a Sailor and Keys to the Kingdom. My second book is actually, it's this whole transition from the law and into sailing. So it captures all that. And it's called Keys to the Kingdom because Philip titled it. I gave Keys to the Kingdom back, and said, no, thanks. I don't want the big law career. I'm going sailing.
Nice. Like
So that's a great book.
well
Yeah,
done,
great
Phil.
book for all of it. Don't give him too much credit. No. I read the book. I'm just kidding. But so all that book, it tells all that. And so what I became is like a sailing speaker and a sailing book writer and YouTube. I started a YouTube channel and I became this sort of sail-lebrity is what we called it jokingly. But that was my new
Mhm.
identity. We'd go to boat shows, we'd go to book signings, I was the kind of sail-lebrity that people would know when we'd pull into anchorages and stuff. And that was fun. And it made a little bit of money and, we got by and I enjoyed it, and it got to be a little too much limelight and I wanted to pull out from it. But that became my new identity. So I felt confident and good that I was a decent enough cruiser and sailor, to be that.
Mhm.
And so we did that for, 12, 10, 15 years we've been doing it now that we're still cruising. And that now I feel like, Bill, now that you've asked me this question, I can see that in my life I was trying to get somewhere supposed to be successful. And then I feel like I've lost it. But I feel like now none of that really matters anymore. Like I've already accomplished everything that's wonderful. If I died tomorrow, I'd be like, man, I had a hell of a time.
Mhm.
Did you see all that stuff I did? That was great. I'm unfulfilled completely.
But
2
it's our
lifetimes
ability
over.
to redefine success, and it's part of our
Yeah.
journey in life, all of us, and that's part of the reason I do this show, to be honest, is that people can learn from others' stories that we get to define our own success, and that's
Right.
kind of what you've done. That's exactly what you've done.
Apparently. A
So
couple times over.
yeah, exactly, and you being able to recognize and follow up on it and appreciate it is truly a gift. So what role does work play in your life now?
So now I'm in the new chapter. Started all over again, kind of. You don't know this last little part, Bill, so this will kind of surprise you. But currently, our boat is for sale, the sailboat. And I don't think you knew that part, but this just happened like a few months ago. But we decided to sell the sailboat. We're probably going to get a different boat in the next couple of years because we wanted to do international travel.
Okay.
Like you and I've talked about, we're doing Africa this year in Dubai, which is very cool. But we've set the sailing aside so we can do like Alaska and Portugal and like things like this that are very hard to do when you own a boat as well. So we're doing that. But during this chapter, I'm yet again, there's a theme. I can't stop writing. I've written a literary fiction. It's my first literary fiction book that I'm promoting now. And I've been working on the sequel to it, which is really coming along. And so I feel like now I'm a novelist. Now I used to be a lawyer, used to be a sailor, novelist, but that's the new chapter. So I'm promoting the books that I'm self-publishing now and based on my eclectic, rich past. Lots to tell.
Well, and great. So we'll jump into your writing in just a second, but one of the things, well, let's jump into it now. One of the things that I've kind of surmised from your writing is that
Mhm.
you really try not to have little, I'll call it Hollywoodish endings where everything's wrapped up in a bow and everyone lives happily ever after. I don't think that's the point of your writing. And you have written several books. You've written fiction, you've written nonfiction, and now Clovis and the follow-up coming. Why does that feel important to you? Open-ended or to leave it without that Hollywood riding off into the sunset?
Wrapped up in a bow. Yeah, you asked me this before, and I'm glad you did because I've been thinking a lot about it. And I answered the first time off the cuff, and I listened back to it. It was a good answer. You asked me, if it is a life, good if nothing's resolved, and I said no, absolutely not. I think if everything's resolved, Bill, you might be dead.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a good thing. In my books, I want it to feel real. It's a story. There's people that come in and they come in violent, vulgar ways sometimes. Some things are perfect and wonderful. Some things wreck apart. nothing ever ties up in a perfect bow. So often you've seen my life, my career is like look great and then it fractured,
Hmm.
and then my personal life was a marriage and then it exploded, but now I have these other connections. And so to me, a book should never end. It should just cycle through to the next story personally. But I like when
Well,
things are left unended because that's more real. I think you're going to feel like it's an actual story. It's not a Hollywood glimpse. But I'll tell you, Bill, I did have a lot more closure than I did when I first started Clovis. I hired an editor last summer who helped me. A little aside, the book was about 3 times as long as it is now. If you can believe that. I wrote a lot. I talk a lot, but I hired an editor who helped me scale it back. And one of the things he said, because it was still messy at the end, but he wanted even messier. He wanted even more the career. He wanted that left open ended, and I had buttoned it up, and he opened it back up. And there was a relationship thing that I had closed up, and he opened it back up. So he helped with
mhm,
that. He even made it more messy. And I think now with the sequel, it's really cool because I can pick up these strands that I
mhm.
left and start a new braid. And it's just really, that's how life really is. So books should really be that way.
You know, in my experience, the people that write successfully write way more than what is going to really be effective in the book.
Yes. Oh,
Mm,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
to- like buying a steak, you have to cut out the fat. And it's another example, finding someone that you can trust to help guide you on things that maybe we need guidance on. So finding an editor that helped you scale it back, but also said, no, 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 don't close that up. Open that back
Mm.
up, leave that open. That's when we have to get out of ourselves and say, there are people that know things that can help us. And I have to let my ego down enough to say, I need help, help me. That's brilliant. What do you want the readers to get? How do you want them to feel when they've read your books? And let's go particular to Clovis.
Clovis is very close to home for me, obviously. As we've talked about, it's autobiographical for a good bit of the childhood. I want people to walk away from Clovis and ready to accept change. I want them to realize that in their lives and in everybody's lives, things are going to knock you over. They're going to shove you sideways. People are going to die. It's going to be tragic. But when those things happen, it's usually open you up for something new. And the beauty of hindsight, when you look back, you can see all of those twists and turns were important and they were lessons, like you said, you learned from them. But in the moment, change hurts and it's very painful and it's very disruptive and everything was going perfect, you think. But change is also the thing that gives you perspective for new things. Often you can't see a new idea until things have
Mhm.
changed. You know what I mean? Usually businesses, when they're adapting, it's because something hit them very hard, and they almost probably went under. But you saw a life raft. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
well, let's try that. Change does that. So change is huge for me. And another big thing for Clovis, I hope, and there's a whole nother topic we don't have to get onto, but I hope people empathize with people different from them after reading my book. I hope they see characters in my book that are different than them, and they will take a moment rather than just judge that character to think, who are they and what are they
Mhm.
about? And do I maybe know someone kind of like this? I hope to garner more empathy. Those are my two purposes.
I think we've talked about this. The idea of looking other people, things, other cultures, and looking for
Yes.
similarities and looking for
Mhm.
positive lessons is, I
Mhm.
think, the key to this crazy world getting maybe just a little bit less crazy.
I 100%
And
agree.
travel has done that so much for me. And we talk, people need to travel more because I think they'll learn more and start to understand that, yes, there are different ways to look at things and different ways to be. And if we can get over our fear, which is pounded on us, and yeah, that's not a bad thing. We're the same in this regard. Anyway, the young adult threshold that you can be a difficult place to write honestly without softening the truth. When you were writing it, who did you feel you were really writing it for?
Wow. I was thinking this morning, Bill, if you would get here. This is a great place to go. Because I don't think it's anything you know quite yet. So one cool thing that happened in writing Clovis for me, what I tried to do in the beginning is write the book actually from the perception of a child, because the narrator is a kid. She's 6, she's 10, she's
Mhm.
13. You grow up with her. And so her perception of her family should change, right? I mean, we all see our parents different when we were 6 than when we were 10, when we were 20. And so my mom, He's going to be the main character of all of this, Bill. And if you've seen the intro, the dedication, the book is dedicated to my mom. And in childhood, you'll see in the book, she's harsh. Oh my gosh, Bill, she was to us, she was so mean. Lord, we had to clean our whole plate. Even if it was liver and onion. Go to bed. We were mean. We'd have no dinner, go straight to bed. Grounded in my house, you did not leave your room. Like food was brought to you. Like that was grounded. And in the time, it was horrible and hard, and all my friends had it easy. And I was so mad at my mom. I was so angry with her. Hindsight, she's an amazing mom. I'm an amazing woman because she did all of those very mean things. I didn't know that at the time. And so I hope in the book you see Callie, the main character, start to soften towards her mom. In the adult years, then she's like, she's just letting go of the last tendrils of anger towards her mother. And she's realizing she judged her mom for bad mistakes her whole life. Mom made bad decisions. And where is Callie sitting now in like the end of the book? And a pile of bad decisions, and that's the moment you look back and you think, maybe I was being judgmental. Maybe I'm not quite the person I am. And Bill very quickly aside, but what happened in my writing of this book is my mom passed away in November of 24, and it was suddenly and unexpectedly, and I'll keep myself together, but I was able in the book to right some wrongs. And I mean like WRIT, right some wrongs. I was able to say things to her that I couldn't in life. So she's the main character.
I can see the emotion. Obviously, it really resonates with you. Being able to right the wrongs, as you say, WRITE, is a beautiful cleansing act of resolution. So, if for no other reason, the book is worth it from that perspective for you, but it's going to be helpful to so many other people. But what do you want other people to take from the book?
Like I said, the change in the empathy, I think is very, very important. I hope people, welcome change in their life and welcome more characters. One of the ones I haven't really touched on, the empathy part, Bill, the main part for me. What I mean by that is you'll find in the book, it's another huge theme, but my brother, John, he's Jude in the book, he's gay. I didn't know this growing up, and I didn't feel it as a kid. I always felt he was different, like he was softer, smarter, didn't really fit into our childhood circles, but I didn't really know why, and really didn't understand that. And I learned that later when we were more closer to adulthood, and he told me. And then it all just opened up for me, like how difficult his childhood was. Like mine was hard enough, but John had this whole other layer of who am I? Where do I fit? How do I be myself? All these things. And so you see in the book him dealing with all that in a childhood that's very harsh and cold. And it's a whole nother layer. So if anybody, all this climate stuff in the world, I'm not getting political, but there's a lot of closed-minded things happening. And if anybody can pick up my book and think a little bit differently about a gay person, that's all. That's a great thing. That's a wonderful thing, because the whole point of the book and why I did it that way, Bill, is I kept the secret too, because it was kept for me. So I hope in the book, you start to like that character. You get to know him. He's not a gay person. He's just a person. You get to know him. You get to like him. You get to understand his mannerisms, his jokes, the connections he has with family. And then you learn he's gay. But then I hope readers are like, well, he's fine with me. I'm okay with that. That doesn't affect me in any way. I can still like this guy. Can we all start to feel that way? You know what I mean? That's what I do hope happens a little bit. So,
Which goes back to what we talked about earlier, trying to find similarities, trying to find the characteristics that we can relate to, that we like, that we enjoy, as opposed to trying to categorize someone and pigeonhole them based on
right.
prejudice and typically ignorance. So looking across your entire life so far, what experiences do you think shaped how you see people most, how you most see people?
Well, God, cruising has been an amazing part of that, all of our travel. Because I would say as a child and growing up and starting in the professional world, I always saw, which you've seen now, as I was the lesser. I was this tiny little being trying to climb up to their pedestal, and just working, working, working. So I always revered everybody. Everybody was smarter than me and better than me is how I saw it. As a kid, I didn't have the great eyes of wisdom. Once I started traveling with Philip on the sailboat and cruising, the amazing part is cruisers, Bill, are this huge, rich swath of people that have been through so much. Often they're like, my story's kind of basic and like ridiculous with them, which sounds silly, but me being a lawyer, leaving the practice and all that that's like opening act, mean, these people have like saved lives, they're military, they're brain surgeons, but they choose a lifestyle like this that's hard by choice. So it makes them a resilient, intentional people. They're very intentional people. And so meeting those people in those walks of life, the later part of the book and my future books are inspired by stories from cruisers, because I've met people out traveling that have been through so much more than me. And I've been through a tiny modicum of stuff. It's in my books. I have not been through the swath of hurt and love and pain that the people I've met out in the world have. And they're still happy and funny, and they inspire me, and they're doing cool things, and life goes on. It's amazing, the people that I meet. They inspire me every day.
And they're probably looking at you saying, she's gone through things that I haven't.
They do.
And that's
It's
how it
funny. You
works.
just feed off each
Yeah,
other.
and that's how it works. We learn from each other. Again, part of the reason that this show exists is hopefully that listeners will hear something, get an aha moment, get an inkling. So if someone is
So-
listening to your story right now, if someone's hearing this and they start to get like this little quiet nudge inside that maybe they need to look to change something in their life, or something needs attention in their life, what would you hope they take away? What would your suggestion, advice be to them?
I'm going to give them one that I found it just the other day, Bill, and it's still sticking with me. And it resonates with my whole message. So it's not anything entirely new, but as a piece of art I saw, and it said, "Remember, you're dying." And I was like, that's kind of morbid. But I read the piece underneath, and the whole thing is, Bill, we're all not here for very long. You know what I mean? Let's take some risks. Change is going to happen. People are going to come and go. It's all brief. So soak it up, jump on things that are scary to you. Reach out to people maybe you didn't want to reach out to before. Try to make new connections. We're all here for just a short amount of time. And I think we all need to try more, both opening our mind, seeing more, expanding what we are able to accept and tolerate. And, just remember you're dying. Embrace it. It's short. Get out there and do it.
You're making me think of something I heard just the other day. It really opened my eyes, where the gentleman said, "I woke up this morning and it's not one more day, it's one less day." And we
Oh,
just don't
yeah.
know.
See,
We just don't know how many less it is. So,
with it.
what you said,
Be brave.
like Shawshank Redemption, better get busy living, get busy dying.
Get busy dying.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a very happy person. I'm a very fulfilled person, but I think it comes from everything I've been through.
Sure.
I think had I played it safe and not tried things or messed things up, I've made a ton of mistakes, and from those have come opportunities. But I think the only reason my life is so rich and full and feels this way is because I've had a full spectrum of emotions and experiences, and I think everybody should.
So be open to it, is what you're saying. Be open, have some trust, take a risk, stick your toe in the water. I've thoroughly enjoyed our talk. We've talked about change and fear and learning to live with uncertainty and finding meaning without tidy answers. Before we finish, we're going to ask
Yeah.
you one question that we ask every guest.
Oh boy.
Annie, what's the point?
I'm going to say, remember you're dying.
Okay.
Get in there and do it. I mean, the point is to get out, be brave, have fun, embrace change, travel, see the world, everything I've said, my entire message.
Great message. Absolutely a great message. Thank you so much, Annie, for your time. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, you might also want to check out What's the Point, episode 99, where Deborah Hammett was my guest. She lives full time on a sailboat. She was a teacher and then a high school principal, and retired and took to the seas. So that episode is
Right.
called Young Salt at 60. So as unique as we think we are, there's always someone somewhere that's not as far off our path that we think how unique we are. Thank you so much. And for the listeners,
My pleasure.
you've been listening to What's the Point, and my question for you is the same as it is for my guest. What's your point?
Thanks for listening to What's the Point. If this conversation meant something to you, we hope you'll follow the show and share it with someone who might also benefit from it. And if you know a guest with a story worth exploring, send me a message, bill@billellis.com. I'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.